So, you want to be a dictator. You're in good company these days. From Hungary to France, South Korea to Burkina Faso, the world is leaning more authoritarian by the minute. It's a big old party, and democracy ain't invited.
Under no circumstances you are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Dictatorship is more widespread than you probably think. Around 30% of the world today is led by some form of dictator. 31% if you include America. There's the A list and the B list. And history's littered with even more examples of powerful people who rolled the dice and won politics' biggest game of absolute power. And were corrupted absolutely. Removing your enemies, weakening instruments of checks and balances, and using the state to consolidate wealth. These are just some of the tools at your disposal once you become the big dog at the top of the hill. And getting there? Well, there's a pattern to the game. A rhythm to the dance of history that you can follow if this is your ambition. Fair warning though, getting in power is arguably the easy part. Staying there? That's a little bit more tricky. And I hate to break it to you, it probably won't end well. Democracies, well, those fall every day. But dictatorships fall even faster. So let's have a look through history to give you the playbook of how dictators rise, what they do when they're in power, and ultimately why they always fall. Because understanding the patterns of history is key to not repeating the mistakes of the past. And unfortunately for the evil amongst us, authoritarian rule, like a storm, always passes for sunnier skies. Spoiler alert for the rest of the video. Despite the heavy topics, it does end on a positive note. So stick around for some childlike optimism. Okay, from the jump, let's get a few things straight. To become a dictator, you're going to need context on your side. Societies only fall in times of great strife, turmoil, or change. Political instability doesn't just happen. It needs a push. It's made by the forces of greed, fear, and anger, which work together to create the perfect storm for a megalomaniac to seize power. Hitler didn't just come to power in 1936. Neither did Mugabe in 1980. Years of austerity and economic stagnation worsened the political environment and created the perfect breeding ground for their tyranny. So ask yourself, are people angry? Good. Is there widespread economic anxiety?
Sensational.
Is society changing in ways we don't yet fully understand? Even better. You're in the ideal position to promise the moon and the stars, and people might actually listen to you. So then decide, what kind of dictator am I? Are you benevolent? Seek legitimacy through institutional power. Are you a big boy with an even bigger toy? Then go the military route. Is your tongue more silver than the devil himself? Then good old-fashioned insurrection is your best bet. Regardless, you're gonna want to follow these few steps to get started.
Hey, all work, no pleasure. I ain't here to make friends.
There's only one real step here. Lead a coup. Create the fall of the Republic. A coup, you say? How the hell do I do that? It's simple, really. Extremism, like tyranny, is born from self-interest and ambition. So let's have a look at the playbook of ambitious tyrants over history. For political insurrection, you've got a few options to follow. First, look to Caesar. Always look to Caesar. Over the years, he turned popularity and wealth into political influence, winning wars and gaining favour amongst the Roman people. His unfettered ambition ultimately led to his crossing of the Rubicon River, starting a brutal civil war, and his eventual appointment as dictator. When in power, he bypassed all traditional institutions to consolidate his rule, centralizing decision-making and eroding the independence of the Senate. The die was cast. All Republican norms went out the window, and tyranny was born. He was the daddy of the game, but he wasn't the last. From Hitler's propagandist maneuvering to take over the National Socialist Party in 1933, to Saddam's brutal takeover of the Ba'ath Party in 1968, ambitious men usually rise through the ranks of government posts, capitalizing on the mistakes of their enemies to gain support through populace. Pro tip: make promises that are so ridiculous, people believe you must have a plan to achieve them.
I will prevent, and very easily, World War III, very easily.
Use your money, power and influence to target and discredit opponents, turning their innocuous mistakes into massive threats to civil liberties. Sidebar: being a man here massively increases your odds. Women rarely get a crack at the tyrant's whip. Honourable mention goes to Indira Gandhi, who ruled India from 1960 to 1980. She came to power through nepotism, declaring a state of emergency in 1975 and suspending all civil liberties and arresting all opposition. This worked for her, but unless your daddy is already in charge, this probably won't work for you. And yeah, this is mainly a boys' club.
Fuck.
The military route follows a similar pattern. Franco in Spain, Pinochet in Chile, and Erdogan in Turkey are just some examples. All used the military to seize power, claiming it was necessary to stabilize the country amidst political violence. The main issue here is that you kinda need to be in the military, and I for one am not getting up at 6 AM to do push-ups in the mud.
God damn it, Trump! You're a goddamn genius!
But if you can hack the tin tuna breakfasts and 5 AM 10Ks, good for you, mate.
8 o'clock in the morning, I'll have fish and a rice cake. At 10 o'clock, I'll have fish. At 12 o'clock, I'll have fish and a rice cake.
Build a reputation and rise through the ranks over the years, eliminating your enemies as you go. Once at the top, build connections in government and start inserting the military into more and more of everyday political life, until the line between the military and civilian rule seems arbitrary to most people.
The Trump administration is now sending active duty troops to the southern border just days after President Trump declared a national border emergency.
Lastly, there's the guerrilla route. This looks best on a t-shirt, but it's also the riskiest. Fidel Castro was a revolutionary all his life, bouncing from revolts in the Dominican Republic at the age of 21 to Bogota in 1948. His revolution, the movement, attempted a coup in 1953, which failed, and led to him being sentenced to 15 years in prison. What's wild here is that his coup was actually a coup against Batista's coup a year earlier in 1952, which shows that not all coups are created equal. But hey, if it was easy, everyone would coup it. Sorry. Luckily for Castro, his popularity led to public pressure, which caused for him to be freed in 1955, where he fled to Mexico before returning 4 years later with the Che Guevara-backed army and taking over the country. After 3 years of guerrilla warfare. Again, this is very much the hard way. Coups come in all shapes and sizes, and can range from years to decades. There are of course some other ways to gain power, i.e. buying votes through elections, but honestly this usually takes too long and it's not really that reliable. But congrats, you've made it to the top. Your coup worked. Now what?
Okay, let's go!
Consolidate power by creating fear. Intimidation and the suppression of civil liberties are the name of the game. Conspiracies massively help here. Blame immigrants, blame disease, blame birth rates or the mythical outside forces coming for your freedom.
What we're saying is send them back.
Even blame the weather.
Next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
Just never, ever admit defeat. Saddam Hussein was a master of this. On 1979, on one of the darkest days in political history, in the Great Hall surrounded by his cronies, Saddam staged a public tribunal where alleged dissidents within the Ba'ath Party were accused of betrayal and conspiracy. 66 politicians were escorted from the room and executed, whilst chants of "Long live Saddam" echoed through the Grand Hall. Many killed were comrades who even helped Saddam gain power just a few years earlier. So yeah, loyalty doesn't always pay for these guys. Solidify control through fear. many leaders often use emergencies, real or fabricated, to justify suspending democratic processes in the name of stability. Brazil in 1964, Chile in 1973, and Honduras in 2009. All democratically elected governments overthrown in the name of economic stability and tackling corruption. Make sure your message spreads far and wide. Sound bites work best here. People love a catchy tune, and they absolutely love a slogan. God, we love a slogan.
We will make America great again.
The seductive appeal of authoritarianism is when people prioritize comfort and security over liberty. And liberty never dies in silence. Replace institutions with those more favorable to your ideals. Take over the courts and appoint loyal judges to ensure favorable legal outcomes. Set new traditions, norms, and public holidays, all with the single purpose of elevating you to divine status. In North Korea, Kim's extensive use of the media and cultural output credits him with extraordinary achievements, often exaggerating or fabricating his role in events. I mean, look at this man. He can barely tie his own shoes, and yet he has 24/7 news coverage dedicated to his glorious rule. Create confusion. Truth? What truth? There's only my truth.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But
the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is one for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, truth and false, no longer exists. Dissenting media? Ban the media. The glory of the empire is the only hymn in town. Find a rock, river, or mountain, and just rename it. Don't worry what it was called before. Lastly, don't forget about the money. Always put your face on the money. Even start a currency, real or crypto, if you have to. The fewer checks and balances against your rule, the better. You could try nationalizing industries, but if you're under any form of capitalist system, this probably won't fly. So instead, use crony government appointments and military contracts to solidify your power base amongst the elites. By this point, you have a lot of wealthy friends, so use them. A golf buddy for defense, your nephew for head of the treasury. Experience is secondary to loyalty. Dictatorships are built on totalitarianism. Enrich enough people to buy loyalty, but not enough to create a viable opposition.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
This is all starting to sound like a lot of work. Retaining power is a lot like spinning plates, with a lot higher stakes. This whole dictatorship thing is starting to resemble one wobbly-ass game of Jenga, where a single slip can bring the whole thing crumbling down. This is because dictatorships are inherently unstable. Systems built on individual supremacy can never last. And remember, after years of working to gain political influence and consolidate power, most dictators, yourself included, are old. And you can't keep doing this forever, no matter how hard you try. If you're not busy squashing one of the regular protests against your regime, then domestic and international economic pressure will often reveal just how fragile your rule is. The overdependence on corruption and repression means that even the slightest blip gets magnified to extreme proportions. And let's face it, Cousin Ahmed's GED is not enough to run an economy, and people will start to notice. And so, the fall begins. The last days of an empire are never glorious. When looking at the Romans, most historians note that their decline was not the result of a single catastrophic event, but rather a series of factors that unfolded over centuries. The interplay of internal weaknesses and external pressures created a cascade of failures that culminated in the fall of the empire. This is common for every dictatorship. Only instead of centuries, it's usually decades. The failures of centralization become more and more apparent every day. And the absence of those dismantled institutions leads to dramatic state inefficiencies which cause famine, hunger, and disease, if not just general discontent. Look to China under Mao, the Soviet Union, Iran, Egypt, Syria, or Zaire. Unaddressed crumbling infrastructure and the endless sapping of resources led to the pathetic decline of those brutal regimes. And this time won't be any different. At some point, even your cronies will turn on you, after the mere suggestion of more state-sanctioned violence. Gaddafi's regime in Libya collapsed mainly after elites and military leaders defected during the 2011 civil war. You'll be surprised just how quickly those men can turn snitch when the cavalry comes knocking. People are hungry, people are angry, and fear doesn't work anymore. You have no choice, you have to run. So you want to be a dictator? Good luck. It won't work for you. The worth of a state, in the long run, is in the worth of the individuals comprising it. And whilst many people may sometimes choose fear because it seems safe, ultimately, when the choice for mankind lies between temporary safety under subjugation and longer-term freedom and happiness, most people will always choose the latter. The rule of a dictator relies on division, fear, and corruption. But we decide whether or not to be divided. There's no denying, we're in the midst of turbulent times. From the internet evolving global communication and eroding the concept of truth, to increasing silos of information, making more and more people distrust their neighbour. The world seems more confusing than ever, and authoritarians seem more legitimate. But the thing about these moments is that they never last. Dictatorships always fall, because the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of people and their dreams. And the arc of the moral universe is long, but it always bends towards justice. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more.